One, two, three, four Amores.
For Amores, um,
Yeah. I
hope you
suppose the
all.
more the merrier, and so I've got Libby now,
Yes, that's
Tiffany,
perfect.
Renee. All right, that sounds good. So in that case, you can, so if you go first, then Amore, because your screen's up already, we can see your images. So if you want to take it away, then off you go.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Tony, and thank you for having us. So we're Mapping Black London. I'll let everyone go around and introduce themselves. I'll introduce myself first, and then I'll give you a bit of an overview of the project before we get started. So my name's Libby. I'm a second-year PhD student at Northeastern University of London. My PhD focuses on digitally mapping the Black African presence between 1720 and 1840 in London. I've been a research assistant on the Mapping Black London project since 2022. I'm really excited to be here with you all today. So I'll pass over to Renee first and introduce herself.
Thank you, Libby, and hello, everyone. Thank you so much for having us. I'm Renee. I'm a recent doctorate graduate, just this year, actually, and I'm coming in as the project manager for this next phase of work, which is really exciting, and I'll be sure to give you all a little update and information on this next phase, but really happy to be here.
Thanks, Renee. Tiffany, do you want to go next?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Tiffany. I am a first-year PhD student in the English department in Boston. And I joined the Mapping Black London project when I was doing my master's, and now I'm continuing it here at Northeastern. And my area of focus is people of color in 19th century British literature. So I focus specifically on the 19th century side of the website and the exhibits.
Pass over to Amore and Adil, who are in front of me. I'm not looking strangely
Yes.
in front of me on the screen.
The London side of the team is in the same room, but we are working off of different devices. Hi, everybody. Thanks for having us. My name's Odile. I am similarly as Tiffany, a first-year PhD student. I am also doing history, Black history. I'm part of the Mapping Black London team, same as the rest of us since the start of 2022. And my PhD focuses on the Southeast Asian diaspora in London. So in particular, sort of migration patterns from Southeast Asia into Britain between 1750 and 1850. And I'll hand over to Amari.
Hi, everyone. I'm a final year, so third year history of creative writing student at Northeastern University London. And the same as everyone apart from Renee and Tiffany, I've been on the project since January 2022, and I'm excited to go forward. And I'm thankful for Tony for hosting us today.
Great, thanks everyone. And we do have two other members of the Mapping Black London team, well, a few other members, but two other key members of the team, Dr. Oliver Ayres, who's co-PI with Professor Nicole Aljo. I believe they may be watching in the background, so at the end they can help us answer any of the questions that you guys have. So please do feel free to put any questions or comments that you have as we're going through. We'll leave them to the end and have a chat about them afterwards. So let's kick off. So I'll give a very brief introduction to the project. So Mapping Black London started in 2019. We started by looking at the Black presence in London during World War II, looking at London as a global city during this time and really focusing on changing the narrative about kind of the key 1948 date where usually Black historical studies start with the Windrush generation, and we decided to start looking just a little bit earlier, 10, 15 years earlier, to see if we could map Black presence here in the city before that date. That was something that was a very kind of fruitful experience for the team. And so when Professor Nicole Aljo was over in London on sabbatical from our Boston campus, we decided to push a little bit earlier. So we started in the 20th century, and we decided to go way back to the times of Charles Ignatius Sancho. If you don't know Ignatius Sancho was a polymath. He was a writer, a composer, a musician, and one of the first Black men to vote in a parliamentary election in the UK in the 1770s. So we decided to map London through the lens of Ignatius Sancho, which Adil will tell us all about later, so I won't ruin the surprise. And after these kind of two different but similar projects working on mapping the Black presence in World War II and in the 18th century, we realized that we could kind of combine this to create a bigger project called Mapping Black London, where we aim to map the Black presence in the city from kind of the 17th century, hopefully all the way up to the modern day. That's the big plan for the project. Hence why we have Tiffany working on the 19th century and different people delving in with their expertise in different places. So we create digital maps, as I've said, but we also create other kind of interactive exhibits online, which Tiffany's going to very shortly go through. And we also work on curriculum materials, so for both like educational school groups, but we also work with local community partners, particularly archives, to create exhibitions both inside archives and also around the city, which we will shortly show you. So all of the different phases of the project has led to some sort of digital output, which is what we thought we would kind of showcase today in this kind of hour that we have. So each member of the team is going to go through, I'm going to kind of click through the website. So I'm going to disappear in a minute so that I'm not trying to look confused on the screen as I move through all the different tabs. But we're going to go through all of the different phases and talk a little bit about not just kind of the output, but also the research process. So kind of what happens behind the scenes, how were these exhibits that you can see online created, what was the thought process behind them, and also how you can use them for kind of your own like fun for historical interest, but also maybe for developing with school groups or youth groups that you may be involved with. So I think that's enough from me. I will pass over to Tiffany. But as I said, please do add any questions, comments that you have, and we'll be very happy to talk about them at the end. And I will disappear and start going off screen, but we are all here in the background. So over to you, Tiffany.
Thank you. So I'm so excited to talk about the two exhibits that I created for the website. So the exhibits that I have on are Mapping Mary Prince and the Arts in London exhibit. They're both two different types of exhibits, so I wanted to kind of go through that today. I wanted to start by giving a bit of an overview on each of the exhibits, as well as talking about the process of creating these exhibits, and then also a little bit about the mediums that I decided to pick and why I picked those in particular to showcase this information. So we'll start with the Mapping Mary Prince. So this exhibit is an overview of Mary Prince's life, specifically told from her narrative. So I looked directly at the history of Mary Prince, and I used that information that was inside of the narrative in order to create this exhibit. The exhibit uses StoryMap, which is a software that allows you to map different places. And so with this, we're able to go through and go to all of the different places that she mentions throughout her narrative. With each specific location that I mentioned, there is a description about that location that comes again directly from the book. And it's also paired with a piece of art that corresponds to the information that we can see there. I wanted to also have the maps next to the artwork to have this very visual component so we can kind of see all of those different aspects. And the map is showcasing her movement through the Caribbean as she goes and arrives in London. So we get an overview of all of the different places that she has been through. So in terms of the process of creating this exhibit, I started by just rereading the text. This is a text that I have used previously, and so I wanted to just reread it and kind of look specifically at all of the different locations that are mentioned. So I started by making a spreadsheet with the different locations, adding in a description of each of them, specifically the date for them, as well as the coordinates, which was a key thing in terms of actually mapping the different places. Because when you're using StoryMap, you need to know the longitude and latitude information in order to input that in so it can pinpoint the exact location. One of the challenges that I faced throughout this process of creating this exhibit was that within the narrative, there are places that are mentioned that the modern day names are either spelled differently or there's some kind of differences between them. So I did rely on the endnotes of the book as well as just further doing some research, just so I was making sure that I was able to map the locations specifically as I can with the information that I was given. So I do talk about in the description some of those differences between the spelling and other things as well. And the reason why I decided to do the mapping was because I felt this was going to be the best way of showcasing this information to show her movement in a way that we can kind of start at the very beginning and get all the way to the end and see just the progression from location to location, as also just the different correlations between all of those. And I think that allowing us to see it in this type of way is a really interesting way to look at the narrative and kind of isolate these places in a way that you can really pinpoint and understand all of these different things that have happened throughout her life. And I think that by having it in this way, again, it really also shows people as well the kind of modern day locations of where these places are, and you can sort of see that throughout this. So that's the Mary Prince exhibit. And then I want to talk about my other exhibit, which is the Arts in London exhibit. So this is a completely different medium. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that as well. But this exhibit focuses on 5 individual artists within the 19th century, and specifically the connection that they have to London. So every single person on this list has a biography, and they also have images, paintings, and other forms of media that help to represent the type of artistic work that they did. And with this, I really wanted to highlight these individuals and have a place where all of their incredible work and information about them can be put inside of one particular article. The process for doing this was I first started to brainstorm individuals who I had either heard about previously, maybe I didn't really know too much about, but I wanted to kind of explore their lives a little bit more, and looking for those themes around the arts. That was the major thing, is I really wanted to highlight that key theme throughout this exhibit. And I think that it's something that kind of showcases just the influence that these people had at this time in the arts in particular. So then it was about writing short biographies for every single person that showcased enough information where we got a good sense of who they were, but also kind of highlighted the key points about them. And again, I wanted to have visuals of this. So we do have some videos on here as well as paintings and all of that, that really kind of show this visual component when it comes to the arts, because I think that really helps to bring all of these things together. I thought a list would be a good exhibit idea, and unlike the mapping, I felt like the list would be a good location for people to be able to kind of come to this specific exhibit and have all of this information here that they could read through. If someone might be working on a project about a specific individual that's mentioned here, they can go to that particular section, read about them, kind of get some key information. And I feel like it's a good sort of starting point for all of this. And I really felt like having this at the center of it and kind of organizing it in this way allowed for really easy access to this information, and also room for people to kind of use this as like a touchstone to be able to go and continue to do more from this. So those are my 2 exhibits, and I really encourage everyone to go play through them, check them out. I think that there's a lot of really great information here to read and to learn more about. So thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Tiffany. I will hop over to our next section of the presentation. So the very start of our research journey began with a project called Ignatius Sancho's London. So not unlike the exhibits that Tiffany has created for our website, we started with more or less a case study of this individual called Charles Ignatius Sancho. He was born around 1729, he died in 1780, and he was for a long time known as the first Black British or documented Black British man to vote. We have now recently discovered that that's not actually the case, but I'll touch on that more later. We started as Ignatius Central London in January 2022. Me, Libby, Amore, and a former member of the team, Ellen Valente, were recruited as undergraduate research assistants, and we were asked to read Ignatius Sancho's letters. So there is a collection of his letters that were bundled and published after his death. So in particular, this is the Vincent Coretta edition of the letters, and we were tasked to read those and to look for locational data. So any sort of information pertaining to where Sancho was, or where his correspondents were, or his family, or anything pertaining to the geography of his life, basically. This was done as a sort of, well, both to supplement the information that is already out there about Sancho, right? Because we're not the first people to look at his life or his story. But it was also kind of to provide a little bit of a counter narrative to some of the maybe not necessarily correct information that is out there on him, and also just to, you know, use him as a nice gateway into Black British history and into this idea that Black history is British history, right? That this isn't necessarily something that ought to be separated from the canonical British history. So the outputs of this project, which was only lasted a couple of months, we only had from January to May to complete this work. The main outputs were, again, maps. So obviously, as you will have seen now, the trend sort of in our project is that we are a digital humanities entity. So we like to produce material that people can access online and not just offline, that people can use in different kinds of ways that provide visual representations of information. So this is both, you know, in terms of like accessibility, but also just to provide some new and maybe more engaging ways for people to look at this stuff. So we had two main maps. The first is this ArcGIS map. I won't talk to you about the software of ArcGIS because that would be a seminar in and of itself. So I won't bore you with that. But this contains basically all of the points, all of the locational points that we found in Ignatius Sancho's letters. So they are color coded. There are sort of layers that you can toggle on and off. There is a tutorial on the website. So right up there, it says how to use this map. You can watch a little video in case you need sort of more step-by-step instructions on how to use this map. And then the second map that we created is called a flow map. This is the flow map here. So this is just to give a bit of an overview of quite how far-reaching Sancho's network was. So this connects to all of his correspondence, so the people he was writing to and receiving letters from. And as you can see, that spread sort of across England and Scotland as well. So like an overview of his sort of the far-reaching nature of his network. Again, this is all accessible through our website. So if you want to have a proper look at all of this yourself, you can. If you hover over the letters, there'll be a little bit of information about who that was sent to. So I will just take you through the story map that we have on our website. I won't do the whole thing again. This is sort of meant to be perused in your own time, but it is a good sort of medium to talk to you a little bit about the details and the findings of our research project. So again, Sancho, 1729 to 1780. His letters were published by his wife and some of his friends after his death. The journey of sort of, I don't know if I should describe that as a rags to riches story, but it could be interpreted as a story like that, similar story. So he started out, I mean, we're hesitant to say that he was enslaved, likely enslaved or socially enslaved, if not legally enslaved. This is a term that I'm borrowing from Libby, who uses that in her research. But by the end of his life, he had gained some renown, and he was known as a man of letters. He was published. He had published music. He was a gentleman, right, by all intents and purposes. So the map takes you through his life, basically. As you can see, it contains all of the locational data points that we discovered in the project. It tells you a little bit about his journey with the Montagues. So he was in custody of, we think, the three Legge sisters up until his adolescence. He was taken under the wing of the Duke of Montagu, which was not uncommon for the Duke. I think he had other sort of people of color, I think in particular young Black men that he sort of meant to educate and meant to help in life. He runs away as a young man, 18, 20-ish, becomes butler to the Duke of Montagu. And when the Duke dies, he starts working for the Duchess, who seems to take a liking to him. And when she dies shortly after, she leaves him an annuity of £30 a year, which is quite a lot at the time. And arguably, you could say that that is sort of the point that really changes his life as a young Black man in London. There were many others like him who were not so fortunate to have a steady source of income and his own money to use and spend. He eventually marries a woman called Anne Osborne. In 1758, he continues to work for the Montagues. So this is where he gains a sense of financial and social stability, right? And he eventually becomes valet to the new Duke of Montagu, which is the son-in-law of the first Duke that educated him and taught him to read and write and such. So valet is a very that's quite a high position, right? So that puts you at the very top of the servant household. So important individual within the Montagu household. And this is when he really sort of enjoys that period of financial and social mobility. So he is evidently able, has the time and the money and the creativity and everything, right, to write music, to publish music. He writes his letters, he publishes his letters. Letter writing, in case anyone might not know, was sort of a gentleman's pastime in this time. So it wasn't just a private thing that you necessarily wrote a letter to your friend and your friend read that letter and put it away. Rather, letter writing was sort of like sometimes a public kind of art. So you showed off your literacy and your poetic turns of phrases, and some of these letters were published or displayed, and others could read them and enjoy the use of language in them. So an intellectual, creative public figure at this point. The Duke, I should maybe mention part of that renown is reflected in the fact that he was painted by Gainsborough. So this is only a sort of hastily done painting. I think it says on the back it was done in an hour and a few minutes or something like that. You can find that on the website and elsewhere if you Google it. Gainsborough was a very famous painter at the time, obviously. So yeah, just another example of the sort of status that he gained. The Duke of Montagu buys him a shop. So with the help of the Duke, Sancho becomes a grocer, a shop owner. He sells various sort of transatlantic trade related items, tobacco, rum, newspapers, things like that. The shop was located at 19 Charles Street in Westminster. That location is now where the Foreign Office is located, interestingly. If you are curious, you can walk by there. There's a tiny white plaque sort of up on the wall. You have to look up, which is a little bit difficult sometimes to do. So here you can see this is the Foreign Office now, and that was a little bit further down, right halfway, that road is where his shop was located. So this is King Charles Street now in the current day. So as a shop owner, Sancho is eligible to vote, and he does. He does in 1774, and then again in 1780, that's the year he dies. And we had always thought that that was the first Black British man to vote, or he's often described as such, but it's now come out not too long ago. There's a Guardian article that we can maybe link in the chat at some point about a man called John London, who was a landlord, a Black man landlord, and he voted in 1749. So alas, it's not Ignatius Sancho anymore, not the first Black Briton, but nonetheless still a sort of very important and interesting figure. So we shared all of these findings at our launch event in May 2022. One of the big sort of findings that we were very keen to share is that Sancho was thought to have 7 children. This was usually, you know, the spiel that everyone gave. He had 7 children, some of whom survived infancy, some of whom didn't. But we discovered that there was an 8th child. There was an eldest daughter, his very first child with Anne Sancho, who did survive past infancy. So she lived to be 47. And Marianne is a new discovery, right, that we got to share with everybody. And someone who took a particular interest in that research finding was Patterson Joseph. So you will have heard of him, I want to say, might have heard of him, right? Peep Show, Vigil, he's been in various shows and movies, Wonka recently. He was writing his novel, The Secret Letters of Charles Ignatius Sancho. And this was before he had published that novel. He caught wind of our research. We invited him to the launch event. He read a little bit of the then unpublished novel. He didn't know this stuff that we were sharing, especially about, you know, this new child and everything. So he was very keen and very interested. Has used some of this research for sort of some rewrites of the novel right before it went to the publisher, and he has shouted us out in his acknowledgements, which is very kind and lovely of him. There were a few others present at the launch event that sort of turned out to be lovely people to be in contact with. So of course Patterson Joseph was there, but there was also a representative present from the Black Curriculum, which is an organisation that focuses on addressing sort of certain gaps in the British history curriculum. And there were also some people present from what used to be the London Metropolitan Archives, but what is now the London Archives. And these people basically were so keen and interested and supportive of what we were doing and what we were trying to get out there that we sort of stayed in touch with all of them, and with some of them some really nice collaborations took place afterwards. So in particular, the London Archives became a very important name, and more I will tell you a little bit about the project we did with them.
Hi everyone. Yeah, this has to be my favorite part of the whole, I think, project, namely because I was able to find myself within the archive. So a little introduction to Unforgotten Lives, Rediscovering Londoners of African, Caribbean, Asian and Indigenous descent from 1560 to 1860. So the partnership between the London Metropolitan Archives and the newly termed Mapping Black London teams, I think was around June 2022. And we had our initial meeting where we basically laid the foundations of our shared missions and what we would hope a partnership would look like. And because the then London Metropolitan Archives, which is now the London Archives, was planning an exhibition to look at buried histories of Londoners, and we had, of course, just finished a project on Ignatius Sancho's London, which, of course, surpassed just Ignatius Sancho's, Odile already stated. We thought a partnership would be perfect. And so from there, each of the undergraduate researchers set out on our own individual research processes. And I know I can speak for myself that I learned so much before I'd been to the same archive, actually. And that was the only archive I've ever been to. And I didn't know how to navigate an archive. I don't know about the other research assistants, but I was very scared. I'd heard 2 things about archives before working on this exhibition, and it was, you're not allowed to touch anything, and you need to be an archivist to enter in or be a historian. And so being able to not only learn the whole archival research process, but to be so supported, not only within my own team, but by the London Archives team, is an opportunity that I'm always reflecting on. From then, for me, because we were given a brief to basically find people and connect the dots. So as research assistants, came to realize that there were a lot of archival gaps in sciences when it came to people not only of African descent, but coloured people in general. And so when we would go into not only this archive, but other archives, whether physically or digital archives, we found a lot of similar trends. And we had to teach ourselves how to navigate the archive, not only physically, but the language that was being used to describe these people. And I know for myself, I ended up looking across not only 6 individuals, but I was looking at collectives of people. And I know someone said in the comments, they mentioned Billy Waters. Billy Waters was actually one of the people that I researched into. His journey is very interesting. And since I'll go back into this, but since the end of the exhibition in April earlier this year, a book has been published on Billy Waters, because it's funny how not only is part of this exhibition, but the fact that people are actually starting to go into the archives and look for these histories is something that I will always be on my mind. And I'm very grateful to be a part of this project, because, as I said, I've not only learned how to navigate archives, but I've learned to find myself within the archives, actually. And I think I had a lot of experiences within the actual archival research journey. And one of them was that there would be a lot of times when I would go into the archives and I would find absolutely nothing at all. So I'd go in with a mission, wanting to find absolutely anything on an individual that I was looking at, and I wouldn't find anything. And then there were other times, which were quite rare, when I would order up some material and I would find jewels. And so I don't know if anyone in the audience has been to archives before, or if they're interested, I would definitely recommend. I always try and tell people to go to archives, because you won't know what to expect until you go to an archive, basically. And with this exhibition, because it did open up the arena for people to really search into these histories, not only in the physical exhibition, but there was a touring exhibition which toured so the exhibition ran from last April, so April 2023 to April 2024. And it toured around 3 locations in London, over last summer. So from, I believe, July to the beginning of September last year. And just being able to see people interacting with these histories outside, I know that was amazing for me. As a history major, it's really interesting to be able to learn history via sight. So rather than you being lectured at and being taught that this is history, being able to actually physically see and imagine what was going on back in, as I say, back in the days, was a really key insight for me, I think. And I would definitely recommend anyone that hasn't been to an archive yet, go to an archive. I think the London Archives is a good starting point. As I said, I did actually find myself in the archives because when I was looking at all these collectives, not all of them were of people from of African descent, but I looked at a collective that was of Native American heritage, and they ended up coming over to Britain as part of a parade. So during the early 1700s, they were invited to Britain in order to basically stop conflicts between the French and the English. And so being able to not only learn about the individual lives, but learn about how these encounters with people from different ethnic groups and different backgrounds really helped to shape not only the cultures that were present in London, but the trade relations, the infrastructure. And it just gave me a better, I think, insight into the city that I was born in. Before this project, I would definitely say that I kind of walked around London blindly. I didn't really think about what came before, what it would have looked like before. But as part of this exhibition specifically, I was able to reimagine and reposition what London would have looked like. And so this is a little shout out to the London Archives and for all the work that they've done. And I would definitely, as I said, recommend anyone to go to the archives. I know as a result of this whole research process, I'll give you a little tour of the Unforgotten Lives exhibition because recently they made a digital version of it so that the legacy can live on. But as a result of the process, I actually wrote a poem reflecting on how I found the whole archival research journey. And it basically summarized, as I said, the gaps that we find in the archives. A lot of the time you'll go into an archive wanting to find a complete story, and a lot of the time you won't find that. And you need to realize that that's fine in itself. And it's okay to not know the whole story of or a whole history, but it's always good to know where to look. And I would say if you're based in London, you have a whole plethora of archives. And so I would definitely tell you to make use of them. I would also definitely encourage anyone to have a look in their own time at this digital version of the exhibition, just in case you don't get to see it. I know when the exhibition was on and the rest of the research assistants, we were all telling everyone to go and visit the exhibition, but just in case you haven't seen it for yourself, I would definitely recommend it. And I hope that even if you don't have a background in history, you can find an interest in these histories. And it's funny because Renee will go into this after I hand over to her, but for me, it's been like a really personal learning journey, and being able to just not only understand what underpins history, but to understand my positioning in history and the way that migration, the transatlantic slave trade, and trade in general has shaped the histories of London and global histories in general, I think has been such a fascinating point to look into. And I feel like I'm learning every day. There's never a point where I stop learning as a part of this project. And I would definitely recommend that, as I said, that you go into the archive yourself and that you visit our website too, because I'm sure that you'll find something of interest to you. This is some of the feedback that we sourced from the guest book. I think it's a really accurate reflection of what the exhibition was able to do. And I will hand over now to Renee. She's a lovely new addition to our team, and she will tell you a bit more about where we see this project going.
Thank you, Amore. Thank you so much. While the research assistants have really given us a great overview of the history of the project and the successes of the project. And I'm just coming in really to talk about the future of the project, the next phase, which is entitled Multiracial Past, Equitable Futures. And as Amore said, this is where the team has really had some expansion and some additions to the team. Of course, we have already mentioned the co-PIs, which is Professor Nicole Aljo, who is a professor of English and Africana Studies in Boston, alongside Professor Ollie Ayers, who's an associate professor in history in NU London. But in addition to the team, this year is Professor Mark Martin, who is an assistant professor in computer science. But he's also an experienced school practitioner and he's also a member of the board of EACT, which is a multi-academy trust, bringing in thousands of students and educators together. But I am also a new addition. I'm coming in as the project manager for this next phase, which I'm really excited about. And my role really is to serve as the main point of contact between the research team, the internal stakeholders, schools, as well as external partners. So I'm really here to oversee the project's development, including administration tasks like user response surveys and tracking the adoption of the national curriculum in the UK. And so together, working with the co-PIs, we will be designing educational programs and workshops and curriculum materials that align with the Mapping Black London project, but also ensuring that they meet the need of schools and the national curriculum. And so we're receiving funding from the Northeastern Tier 3 programme, and it's really allowing us to collaborate with the university's widening access and participation team, as well as I said, internal stakeholders, external and schools, to run mapping workshops with a range of schools across the city to think about how the project can engage with schools to generate impact by empowering students to feel connected to their local histories. And I'm going to be talking a little bit more about place-based learning, which is really central to this next phase of the project. But before I do so, I thought it'd be really good to just start by giving some background as to what inspired this next phase and what we're really trying to address, a pressing need in this moment in time. We looked at a survey conducted by Bloomsbury in 2023, which found that more than half, so 53% of those surveys could not name a Black British historical figure, and that only 7% could name more than 4. We were looking at the Royal Historical Society, who also did a report on this kind of lack of implementation of Black history in UK schools. And they reported that even when Black histories are present, a seemingly relentless focus on enslavement and abolition and exploitation is viewed by students as intellectually limiting and at times alienating, end quote. So I've been doing a little review of some of the data surrounding the place of Black history in the national curriculum. And one of the other things that I found was that only 11% of GCSE students in 2019 studied modules that referenced or referred to the contributions of Black people in British history, and only 9% studied modules that made significant reference to the British Empire. So these are really harrowing statistics. Looking at, the government's kind of mandated structure for the curriculum, we find that the Key Stage 3 history curriculum mandates only one specific topic, being the Holocaust. And, while the Department for Education argues that this approach provides schools and teachers the flexibility to incorporate Black history, the absence of a requirement for Black history means that there is often little incentive to change traditional curricula. And there are many organizations like the Runnymede Trust and the Commission for Racial Equality who have begun to advocate for a more inclusive and diverse curriculum. There are also community groups, as Odile and Amore pointed out, like the Black curriculum, who are doing really, really wonderful work at grassroots level to kind of bring this to the fore. And so these organizations have collaborated with teachers to create resources that could be used to teach Black history, such as textbooks and lesson plans and other materials. The MBL team, the Map and Black London team, we have been continually approached during the kind of journey of this project by school teachers who are desperately in need and searching for educational materials about early Black Britons, as well as materials tailored to the local contexts and communities in which they work, coming back to that place-based learning. In addition, which is something that has been mentioned already, we really lent on public feedback at the Unforgotten Lives exhibition at the London Archives. And again, with several requests for the project to be taken into city schools. And so, looking at the kind of current state of Black history in the national curriculum, but as well as the feedback for those who've interacted with the project, we have thought of maybe three or more key approaches as ways to address this central problem. So we've identified three, as I said, particular standout points that I would call them to the project that is particularly important yet largely missing in current implementations of Black history in schools. So the first one being digital resources which allow for a blended approach to teaching, combining traditional in-person learning with digital content. So while digital content related to Black histories do exist, there is not enough varied and culturally relevant resources for different age groups or learning styles or contexts. For example, much of the available content is rooted in US Black history, which may not always resonate with or reflect the experiences of Black students in the UK. So that's digital resources. The second one is place-based learning. I've mentioned it quite a lot already, but it is an educational approach that uses the local environment or local community or culture as a context for teaching and learning. So rather than focusing solely on textbook knowledge or abstract concepts, place-based learning encourages students to connect with their surroundings, making education more relevant and engaging and practical. And the third one being experiential learning, which is a real key focus for this next phase. It is an educational approach that emphasizes learning through direct experience. So rather than simply acquiring knowledge through maybe passive activities like listening in the classroom or reading textbooks, experiential learning encourages students to actively engage in activities that require them to apply what they've learned in real world or simulated contexts. And that's why we're so interested with the work that Black History Walks does, because, Black History Walks offers these tours, giving participants a chance to physically walk through neighborhoods and visit historical sites and learn about key events related to Black history. And so the participants are engaging in real world experiences by seeing the landmarks and hearing the stories. And our project is centrally concerned with thinking about ways we can encourage students to take an active role in their education through experiential learning. So those are just some of the approaches that we have with tackling it's a huge problem, diversifying the curriculum, one that many people are thinking about, but these are some of the innovative ways to address some of the gaps that, haven't quite been touched on in people's advocacy just yet. Next, I wanted to talk about our school outreach and thinking about our target audience, the significance of the target audience, and the potential impact. So the end users that we aim to impact are school students aged between 11 to 18, which is year 7 to year 13 in the UK, as well as teachers across, history and geography, English literature, citizenship, and so forth. And the first phases of the work are going to begin with bringing in partners in and around NU London, the home borough of Tower Hamlets and the neighbouring areas such as Stoke Newington, before branching out to the rest of the city and hopefully other parts of the UK and maybe eventually, other parts of the world. We have a 2-year strategic plan, which we're still formulating and thinking about, but I'll just give you kind of an view over the next 2 years of this next phase, which is focusing on, as I said before, experiential workshops with existing widening participant target audiences. We also hope to formulate an advisory group of local teachers using our established networks, in particular those of CoPI Mark Martin, who is really coming in with a really strong network of teachers. We're also thinking about developing our website and other software to kind of, as we're branching out into the schools and so forth. As we move into year 2, we're trying to scale the numbers that we've reached throughout our workshops within these schools and we've begun thinking about a co-creation of a virtual museum, which we will hopefully pilot with schools and so forth. As I said before, our 2-year plan is we're still in discussions about what the next 2 years are going to look like. And, this is a role that this is my 3rd week. So we're still in discussions about what the next 2 years will look like. But there are some really exciting opportunities and ideas that we have for this next phase. We believe also that collaborations are essential for this next phase of the Mapping Black London project. When I say collaborations, I'm really talking about collaborative efforts to not only amplify the impacts of the work that we've already done, but allowing the project to reach more people, schools, and organizations, proving a mutual benefit for our partners and stakeholders. And some of those mutual benefits may be sharing and co-creating resources and ideas, which can ensure the longevity of both projects. It can be institutional support and the ability to expand our networks by bringing together existing networks, existing knowledge, and members of different teams who have this specific focus on diversifying the curriculum. And so in the next phase of Mapping Black London, we're really thinking about strong and diverse partnerships, which are vital for our growth and sustainability and the success of this next phase of the project. I just want to use the last few minutes to think about some of our impact objectives. So one of the ways that we're going to kind of collate and document impact, should I say, is by gathering feedback, something we're already doing to improve quality. So we're hoping to use both quantitative and qualitative indicators of success through using SEER, as well as pre and post engagement assessments, whether that be through surveys, to measure student learning. So for example, establishing a baseline of what maybe students know already, and then implementing our work and our workshops, and then getting a sense of what they may have learned or how their learning has increased through their interaction with the workshops and with our project. Just scrolling down for the sake of time through my points. Another thing that we've been working on, it's been a first point of call for me, one of my first tasks. I've been working on a multiracial past equitable futures report, developing recommendations based on the project's successes and challenges. It's a report which will examine the current framework of the national curriculum. It will identify representational gaps across subjects. But more importantly, the report will recommend adopting Mapping Black London's tools across subjects, as I said before, like history and geography and literature, promoting a curriculum that highlights the contributions and resilience of Black individuals and the ways in which our project seeks to do that. And other ways that we're thinking about impact on learning outcomes is curriculum enrichment, empowerment for future learning, and then finally enhanced knowledge retention and application. And this is really thinking about building that network of teachers and training teachers to be able to really share these histories in a way in which they first understand, because we believe that there is this link between empowered teachers, a revised curriculum, and then empowered students as well. So that is just a little bit about the future and the next phase of the project. It beautifully brought me on to 7 o'clock, which is perfect. We are going to open for questions in now, and I see that there are some, the chat has been going, so that's really brilliant. And I'll have a look at those questions in just a moment, but I want to invite the research assistants back as well. We also have Dr. Nicole Aljo, and do feel free to unmute and join us with this.
A little bit. Can I say a few things about Black History Walks and what we're doing? Because it
Oh,
ties into what you just
absolutely.
said.
Absolutely.
And it'll answer some of the questions that have been raised in the chat. So just go share my screen. Just give me 1 second or so. I'll find the right image. You've got to click on the sound thing, optimize with video, and then I can share it. You should see our logo coming up there. Give me 5 minutes or so. Me talking, that is. One more time. It should be full screen. There you go. Right. So that's our logo. We do walks, talks, and films all year long for the last 17 years. And what you've seen is a compilation of some different events we've done. You know, walking to a film, a workshop presentation. We do sort of stuff all year long. And we have 18 different walks across the capital, including walks that look at Mary Prince and also Billy Waters and also Ignatius Sancho. So 18 walking tours, Trafalgar Square, Mayfair, Hackney, Theatreland, which is the Piccadilly Circus, Covent Garden area. We have walks across capital, and we show people on the tour about all the amazing African Caribbean history you can find in the streets. And as you can see there, the third picture down, 1, 2, 3, that's a lecture theatre for the people who are interested, because if you put on some interesting, relevant education events, you'll get a crowd. So that's what's going to happen if you do that sort of thing. Apart from that, these are typical walking tour people. You have a right-hand side, you got a Saturday school. Left-hand side, you have some American university students, and they're doing Notting Hill left-hand side and St. Paul's Bank on the right-hand side. We also have a bus tour. So, you know, if you go to Central London, you're going to see those buses driving around in circles. Well, we have a black version. So we have our own double-decker, it's a coach, actually, not a bus, and we drive around the capital, pointing out all the Black history between Brixton, Clapham, Wandsworth, Tower Hill, Westminster, Trafalgar Square, from a bus perspective. We also have a canal cruise, which goes along the canals. You know, Regent's Canal goes from the river all up to Birmingham, Scotland, etc. So this part is set in the King's Cross area, and that boat there on the right-hand top corner side, we go up and down and point out all the African Caribbean connections there, and there's a lot there. We also have a Black History River cruise on the River Thames itself, which goes between Richmond down to Greenwich. Not Richmond, it goes from Vauxhall to Greenwich and back. So on that trip, we actually point out the history in the river itself on each side of the river, and we also have people in costumes, characters in costume, including people like Equiano, Ignatius Sancho, Mary Prince on board the boat, the boat, and they tell you while in costume about the history. And you see that boat there with a swimming pool on top of it. That is not the boat we use, but I like the picture. So anyway, meanwhile, we just introduced helicopter tours. So we now have a helicopter tour of Black history. We fly about 1,000 feet above the ground and point out all the Black history that you can see in this image here. And it links into maps, because I was really impressed with your, I think Odile called an ArcSys map. because it shows you how at one time London was quite a small area, and that helps to understand how it kind of grew because of the empire, because of that massive amount of wealth coming in from Africa, the Caribbean, Southeast Asia, through this river, that helped London to grow at this huge rate. But we'll get back to the match later on. But we have a helicopter tour. We do 3 or 4 times a year. And this is our kind of website. So the website is blackhistorywalks.co.uk. And we do walks, talks, films, and plaque unveilings all year long for the last 17 years. Now, that's one of the books that we got out. Well, my book, I just say. And this book here features, as one of the speakers was mentioned, I think it was Renee, the comparison between Black history here and Black American history. Because what you find is if you go to school in England, we are taught about history in America, oddly enough. Meanwhile, when I did the book, when I wrote the book, I thought, let me explain to people the similarities and differences between the fight for equality in England and the fight for equality in America. Because much as we know a lot about American history, the same sort of things happened here when it came to the fight for equality, when it came to education, housing, employment. So this chapter looks at a comparative timeline between America and England, or the UK, I should say, actually, when it comes to the fight against racist behavior. So we go from the end of World War II to 2020, and that's the biggest chapter in the book. So Notting Hill Walk, we got a walk in Notting Hill, and what happened is a couple of years ago, we transferred or transformed or translated, you could say, that walking tour into a GCSE exam textbook from Pearson. As you know, Pearson is one of the biggest education publishers in the world. So this book is now used in 150 schools, actually, by 10,000 pupils the last time I checked. So it's gone from a walking tour for 15, 20 people to now being used by 10,000 pupils across the nation. And it covers all the stuff that was never there before. We talk about the Black presence in World War II. We talk about migration, police brutality, partner, Susu, Boxland, Carnival, Black British civil rights. It's all in this one book. And Claudia Jones, there, of course, is the first Black British woman to be on the front cover of an exam textbook. Prior to that time, it was Rosa Parks, so of course, it's not British at all. And you can see a sample of the pages here, looking at the Black presence in World War II, the extent of the war damage once the war is over, and also it features, will have a good section on Claudia Jones and how she was such a major influential character when it came to the fight for equality in England, not America. In fact, we mentioned the fact that there was Ku Klux Klan activity in Brixton and Notting Hill in the 50s and 60s. So when Claudia Jones was here, there were Ku Klux Klan people harassing her in that they wrote her letters telling her to stop her Black newspaper being published, and actually went to her offices and smashed them up. So much as people know about Klan in America, we had the Klan right here in the UK, in Brixton and Notting Hill, and there was organized resistance against this Klan behavior. And this is another page from the book, and it features a lot of stuff that we would feature on our walking tours, but now it's in a textbook form to be used in schools. Now I'll leave it there. Let me hand back to my colleagues, and you can carry on as you were before, and I'll stop talking right now.
Thank you so much, Tony. That was brilliant. I love the Pearson book as well, the textbook. That's amazing. Really wonderful work. I don't know if you had a preference for us in terms of the Q&A. If not, we can just start. I can fire a question and then just read the questions in the chat and go from there.
You do your thing, man.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so while everyone's still typing in the chat, I do see some things coming up already. I'm just going to throw out a light question for our research assistants, just as a good way to start. I'm going to ask, what has been your favorite experience on the project so far and why? Maybe let's start with Lip. I know it's hard to pick one favorite.
I can get.
Sorry.
Great.
Oh. Have you turned it off?
Again?
Hello?
Better.
Okay, can you all hear me? Perfect. Okay, my favorite experience on the project, I think for me was going up to Boughton House Archives. So Boughton House it's still today one of the properties of the Duke and Duchess of Buccleuch, who were They married into the Montague family. The aristocratic connections of the 18th century still confuse me, and I claim to be a specialist on it. So yeah, the Balcon House still today is owned by the Clee family, and I've been up there a few times now, and they have a private collection of archival material. And I think that going up there, and it's kind of like a historian's dream of just kind of going into a room with kind of boxes and boxes of historical letters and financial records and photos and maps, and getting to go up there and just basically being able to let loose in the archive and find all of this kind of unseen things before, for me was, I think, my favorite moment, because I love going to the London Archives, the National Archives, but there's just something special about kind of seeing something that you really think no one has actually looked at this since it was put in this box 250 years ago, and that's kind of a special feeling. So yes, I think that's my favorite part of the process so far, is having that opportunity.
Can you guys hear me if I talk into Libby's device and her microphone? Yeah. I would say my favorite, or at least one of my favorite, because it's very difficult to pick one single favorite thing, but one of my favorite things is actually being able to connect with the communities that we talk about and that we sort of mean to serve with this research, right? So a good example was the Brentford community event that we did not long ago for Black History Month. These are like the few sort of moments where we, leave the uni and we leave school and we get out from behind our desks and our laptops and we get to speak to people. And people get to speak to us, more importantly, right? So we always have a bit at the end of our presentations where we open the floor to questions and comments from the community. And yeah, my very favorite moments are always when the elders of the community take over the microphone and, spend a good 5 minutes sharing their thoughts, their experiences, their encouragements for the younger people in the room. I think that's always very gratifying to hear that they appreciate the work we do, and they appreciate our efforts and the fact that we're sharing our time with everyone. So yeah, that's definitely one of my favorite things.
I was literally going to say the exact same thing, especially the breakfast event that we had on the 9th of October. It was amazing, I think, because it was the first time that we've done school workshops and we've showcased our projects at launches, but that was, I think, the first time when we actually really got to engage with a local community. And because we catered to the material that we did for the workshop to the Bradford community, it resonated with them so much. And my favorite part, as the team knows, is going around and talking to everyone and just hearing their insights about their knowledge on Black histories, their experiences within archives, and just being able to talk to people that really have a personal connection to the material. That is always like I think my favorite part.
Thank you all. Yes, there are some questions in the chat. Do you read the chat? Because there are some, we've tried to answer some as well in there. So, but one that I see is, are we able to find out which boroughs or schools are using this version? Do you mean the implementations of our projects? Because if so, as I said, with the place-based learning, we're really focusing on schools that are local. So we're based in the city centre, and we're really focusing on schools that are in and around that area. I don't know whether I can say schools by name, but maybe I should pass this over to Libby. I could probably give us a little bit more information.
Yeah,
Sorry.
Yeah, so at the minute we mainly are working with Tower Hamlet schools. We work with our widening access and participation team, but we're always very happy to expand to new schools, and that's one of the main kind of new chunks of the project. So probably can't share the actual names of the schools, just don't want to give too much information about individual instances, but Tower Hamlets area, but we are happy to kind of expand outside of the Tower Hamlets. So yeah, if anyone is watching and they're a teacher or they've got children who are interested in this kind of information, please do shoot us an email, because we're more than happy to come and speak to schools or get schools onto the campus. So yes, I can see quite a lot of people in the chat saying, you know, grandchildren maybe at school at the minute. And yeah, we're more than happy to have a conversation about how we can get this into more schools, because that is one of the big focuses for the next 2 years of Mapping Black London.
Perfect. And the question has just come in great time. What has been your biggest challenges and how do you overcome them, or how have you already overcome them?
Well, should we do it that way?
Yes.
Yeah, sorry, bear with us, guys. The various devices in the same room is not actually as effective of a tactic as we thought it would be. A big challenge. Well, I would say something that Amore has mentioned before is the issue of archival silences, so-called archival silences. So you're saying, for example, barriers, etc. So maybe less so than the fact that the barriers for us in terms of accessing the archives. I mean, this is one of the big privileges of being a research assistant on this project, is that we get to access these archives, and we were sort of guided into working with this material in a way that made it a lot less intimidating for us. But there are other barriers to the archive, more specifically the people that these records are about, right, are often written from the perspective of either a so-called oppressor or somebody who has either an overt or less overt bias against them. So archival silences or biases are those instances where the archive either tells you an inaccurate story about someone or an incomplete story about someone, or there is nothing there at all. You find something and then you try and chase that, and there is nothing else that helps you follow the thread. And that is a recurrent issue and a recurrent challenge, and not necessarily something that we can claim to have overcome, because that's sort of something that anyone who works in Black history deals with in their practice. But I think one of the ways of mitigating that challenge is to sort of challenge yourself and others as to what legitimate history research can look like, right? It doesn't always have to mean you look at what's in the archival material, and whatever is there, you treat as facts and as gospel, and anything that isn't found in the archives does not count as fact and gospel. I think moving away from that mindset and sort of widening your pool of sources, your pool of perspectives, right, can help. So in specific terms, I'm talking about, okay, maybe you can't find something about someone in 1700 insurance records from the 1700s, maybe, right? Maybe you can't find information about them there, but you can find imagery of them, or you can find letters that they wrote to someone or that were written about them, or they are mentioned in a poem somewhere, or in, right, there's other ways, other traces that you can find of people of color that can help you sort of navigate those archival silences or dead ends. So yeah, I mean, I've picked a very large challenge that's not sort of easily summarized or quickly overcome. But yeah, that's definitely a big one, I think.
That's very true. Nicole has just put in the chat about the fact that, so the census, which is a common source that most you know, historians of other fields will use for their work. We don't really have access to a census that kind of accurately records race and ethnicity prior to 1991 in the UK. So place of origin starts to be included. I think it's around 1851, but don't quote me on that date. And so you can use that, but place of origin is not a very accurate way of tracking this information. So that is another major challenge. I can kind of hop on, if you don't mind, Renee, to the question before, because I actually think that this is another challenge. So we've had a great question about why there's so little coverage of Black history, I'm assuming like on the maps and stuff in North London. And I think that is another challenge that I was gonna kind of bring up, is that a lot of the sources when we're mapping are not kind of like full extensive coverage. So for example, the Unforgotten Lives exhibition we did with the LMA, we got access to their crowdsourced volunteer database that has been going for 25 years now, where people look through parish records and they record people of colour and they add this to a database. So we kind of use that database to create the maps where you can see where Black people were being baptised, married and buried from kind of 1560 to 1840. However, when you look at that map, you can actually get a little bit of a skewed picture of where Black people were living in London at this time, for a couple of reasons. One reason, because not every parish church has been looked through. Not all of the records, A, either survive, or B, have been explored yet by volunteers or scholars. So, for example, Westminster, St Margaret's Westminster Church is not on the Switching the Lens dataset, yet we know from working on Ignatius Sancho and his family that the family, Ignatius and Anne, were married at St Margaret's Church, Westminster. Their children were baptised there. So we know that there were Black people in Westminster being baptised in the church at the time, but that doesn't show up on the map because that parish church records aren't in the data set. So things like, for example, maybe there's littler coverage in places like North London. That doesn't mean that there wasn't a Black presence in Black London, in North London at this time. It might just be that the sources we're using don't show that that presence. And we actually found this quite a lot. So recently when we did the Brentford FC work, and we did work with a school quite far in East London recently, we wanted to show them what Black history was happening in their local areas. So we drew up our maps and we realized, oh wow, we have so little information here for West London, for example, because a lot of the sources we've been using, parish records, criminal justice records, have been focused on the east of London, but that isn't an accurate representation. So this is kind of a challenge that we have in terms of using kind of like off-the-shelf sources, so databases that have already been created, that might not be finished, might not be extensive, there might be gaps in them, and that can kind of skew the picture a little bit in terms of where the Black presence looks like it is. So yes, so we know very much that North London, West London is less well covered on the maps. Kind of the City of London, Westminster, Soho, East London is quite well covered at the minute, but at the minute those other areas aren't. So that's something we'll focus on in the future, but it's another challenge that we have as historians and as research assistants, is to going into new places, new archives, looking for new sources to show us that Black presence. But yes, that definitely doesn't mean there isn't a Black presence. There was, it's just the sources are an issue there. Sorry.
Thank you for that. No, that's perfect. There's another question which has come in. It says, is there a London Collections Consortium or a way to search across archives for information about local Black histories?
Are you happy for me to go again?
Yeah,
On that one?
absolutely.
So the only thing that I can think about is in 2007, on the 200-year anniversary of the 1807 abolition of the slave trade, there was a big project that happened across archives, museums, local community groups in London. And the website is a little bit difficult to navigate, but you can actually find the work that all of these different kind of London boroughs did. And different archives and scholars were involved with that. So that's obviously 2007, so quite a long time ago now, but I've used the resources on there, and there's some absolutely invaluable information on there in terms of very specific local history. So different councils putting, you know, local archives, local museum information up. Would be great if maybe someone can update that in the future. You can again look at the Switching the Lens dataset, which is open access on the London Archive website, and that has at the minute, I think, the most extensive parish records for the Black presence in London. And our website, little plug there, but we do have kind of a lot of archival material on there too. So not so much as like a one-stop kind of website, but a few different options I know of there. I don't know if anyone else has any to add.
I think there's also the Black Cultural
No, I
Archives.
would say that if anything, you can just sort of endlessly repeat the same point of the local archives, right? That's stuff is. It's sometimes difficult to resist the urge of just going to Google, right? And it's kind of sometimes you wish that there was an equivalent of Google where you can plug something in and like the internet shows you exactly where you can find all the relevant archival material in which location. But unfortunately, as far as we know, that yeah, that would have certainly made our job a lot easier. But no, so it's just looking for projects, research teams that have their own websites that can sort of link to a number of helpful places where you can find further sources of information. Yeah.
Yeah, I think some people are very helpfully putting some great suggestions in the chat about the National Archives having a catalogue. So if anyone has any, please put them down. It's great for us all to to have this to help each other.
Yes, there's another question here that is kind of thinking about the next phase of this work on school outreach. And, you know, you have all, as researchers, have gone out and started doing workshops. So the question is, how receptive were young Black people to Black history? It is a two-part question, which says, do they see the relevance in their lives today? So how receptive were they, and were they able to understand the relevance in their own lives?
That's an interesting question. I would say there's a kind of I don't know if it's a trend, but we have noticed before that, so we've given our workshops in two different age groups. So we have mostly focused on sixth form, which is obviously slightly older, sort of 16 to 18 age group. But we have also now given a workshop to year 11s, I think.
And year 9s.
Oh, year 9s, all right, year 9. So that makes them 11 or 12, I think, in age, the students. And it's interesting to see the sort of difference in receptiveness and engagement in those age groups. I think that sixth form students are interested, right? But also maybe a little bit more inhibited in terms of wanting to know more or expressing their curiosity. It'll be one or two, right, that really pick up on what we say, and you can sort of see them really tuning in, and then afterwards they might come to us and sort of, you know, express that they would like to learn more and know more, and they ask us for advice. But actually, I think the younger groups tend to be the most sort of immediately enthusiastic and immediately curious. And maybe that is also just sort of a sort of expression of a more childlike curiosity, maybe. But I also wonder if, you know, that says something more about exposing people earlier on to this information to create a stronger link for them in terms of their identity, right? And recognizing themselves and their own family. And maybe even some families' sort of stories and the histories that they know of, and connecting that to big official curriculum material, right? I think that maybe the earlier on you do that, the stronger the response. And hopefully, of course, the stronger that connection will remain throughout their education and throughout their lives.
Yeah, I think another key thing is the place side to it. So we've seen this both with like community groups we've worked with, but schools as well really connect when we make it local history. So, you know, we had someone at the Brentford community centre saying, you know, they were mapping a parish church, and he was like, I go to this parish church, been going to this parish church for 20, 30 years, and I had no idea that we had Black baptisms in the 18th century at our local parish, and, you know, saying they'll go back and share this with the congregation. And so it's these little kind of local connections to the history, which I think the students find as well. You know, they can look on the map, see where they live, see how close that was to, you know, a Black person that might have lived in the 18th century. And that's kind of like a special moment, I think, for them and for us to see them connecting on that really kind of place-based level, as Renee was saying earlier. Something we're really kind of keen to foster in the next phase of the work is how to expand but keep it local in that place and digital realm.
And if I can just jump in again, just really quickly, is when it comes to the GCS exam textbook, it's gone down really well in schools because the pupils find they can identify with the people, the situations, the stories in the exam textbook. So that means that they like using it, like reading it, And that means that Pearson actually oversold its kind of expectations. They actually sold out, had to print some more books. And because the pupils like it in the schools, the teachers love it, yeah? And when I say teachers, I mean I'm talking about teachers up in Norfolk, because actually sometimes I go to schools to do talks on the book. So I went to like Norfolk, a place that took me 4 hours to get to in the bush, proper like countryside, you know. When I got there, you could see the actual sea. I mean Norfolk, it took me like I had to leave like on the Thursday morning to get there for Friday. Sorry, yeah, Thursday morning to get there for Friday morning. Then anyway, so when I got there, yeah, it's a all white class. I did like 3 hours non-stop, apart from breaking between rather. And the teacher told me she'd never seen them so attentive, yeah. And then the teacher told me later on that the parents of the pupils in the class came to her the next day to tell her how much their kids had enjoyed the class. And I thought that's unusual to have secondary school parents come to school to tell the teacher how much their kids enjoyed the class the day before. So it's gone on really well in the schools. And the other thing is that when the pupils see me and realize that a black guy is the guy who wrote the book, they're freaking out. So it's gone down. To answer ZG's question, it's gone down quite well. So I'll stop talking now.
No, it's amazing to hear, like how you know, because we're kind of focused very much kind of like central London area. It's amazing, and you know, the schools that we're working with are very diverse. So it's great to see how that's being reacted to in Norwich of all places, Norfolk. I don't think we have too much time left. No, thank you.
Yeah, we're at 7:30. I just wanted to pick up on that point, Tony, because it's such an important point and a great way to kind of end the session as well, thinking about how, the impacts on students has a direct impact on teachers, and that is really a focus too. Specifically because Black history is not a mandatory subject, there is a responsibility on teachers to introduce it into their classrooms. And so it's really about making sure that teachers understand the importance of Black history, and it's great that the textbook is facilitating in that as well. So thank you so much for sharing that. Thank you so much for sharing your space with us. We really appreciate it, and perhaps I can actually hand over to you to wrap up. Thank you again.
Okay, well, in that case, thanks to the people who turn up to pay attention to hear this fantastic information. Hopefully, not hopefully, we'll do this again, yeah. So we'll just kind of get together and sort another date in our diaries to do one for probably next year now. And we can do some sort of crossover where you guys come on a walk and maybe you can actually bring on your map. So we do the walk to your map sort of thing. So that would be cool. But yeah, other than that,
Amazing.
thanks to all. And it's been recorded and it'll be up on our YouTube channel, which is basically youtube.com/blackhistorywalks by tomorrow. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you so
Thank you very
much.
much.
Hey
Thanks for
everyone, bye.
appreciate it. Thanks for everyone for joining. I hope it was informative. And yeah, any other things you want to know, it'll be on our website. You can always reach out to us, and Renee will be back with you soon.